How are you?
I did see you wandering up and down the high street.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to St Mary's tonight. And a particular warm welcome to Nick Timothy. It's wonderful to have you with us tonight to talk about the assisted dying bill. And we're very pleased that you've come to just help us think about what that means for us as a community and as a nation, and what its journey through Parliament might look like to answer some of our questions and concerns. So I think most of the conversation will be with Nick. But if you want me to jump in at any point, obviously we're pleased to host this and to provide this space and to think carefully about all sorts of issues, social issues, political issues, moral issues, spiritual issues to do with assisted dying. So please do jump in. I'm going to hand over to Nick. I'm going to let Nick chair the evening. And as I say, if you want me to jump in at any point, I'm very happy to do that. So lectern or handheld, it's up to you.
Do I need? Yes. If you could use, one or the other. Thank you. But thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to you all for coming tonight. I think it's hopefully a less intimidating audience than the last time I was speaking here at the hustings of the general election, when I was still very anxious about the result. It was almost a close run thing. So I'm very pleased to be here as your MP. And when you are elected as a member of Parliament, you obviously know that there's a great weight of responsibility on you as somebody to help people locally with the issues that come up. Have those every week in my surgery meetings, but also on the big issues that Parliament has to take decisions about, and there aren't very many more things more important than this proposal to legalise assisted suicide. I am very concerned about the process and the way we've been asked to consider this. So in 4 weeks tomorrow, we will be asked to give the bill to legalise assisted suicide at second reading, which in effect will be the House of Commons saying yes or no to the principle of this change. But we don't yet know what it is we're being asked to consider and approve or reject, because the bill has not yet been published. And because the proposal has come forward as a private member's bill, this is a little bit technical, but I think it matters a lot. We hear private members' bills on Fridays, most don't pass, but private members' bills come forward straight off as a bill. If this were a government bill, you would normally have a period of serious consultation, a green paper, maybe another paper, which we then call a white paper, where members of the public and where various experts and people concerned about the issue can send in written submissions, talk to civil servants, and help to shape what the proposals are. But we don't have that with this proposal. So all we know at the moment is we will have a bill to consider. We don't know what's in it. We obviously know the purpose, but we don't know the exact proposals. There's been no consultation. And so far there's been no debate. And we will be asked to vote on this bill after 5 hours of consideration in the chamber. That sounds like a lot, but in reality, a 5-hour debate in the House of Commons would probably mean speeches for backbenchers like me, limited at maybe 3 minutes. So not much time for really serious, considered, detailed argument. So I'm very concerned about the process. And I should say up front, I'm very concerned about the proposal. Now, I say this as somebody who's very respectful of the reasons why lots of people actually do want to support this, because we've all experienced loved ones who have died in discomfort, and in some cases we've had loved ones with incurable conditions that cause them pain. But I'm very concerned about the proposal because I think it will fundamentally change the relationship between us all as society and the vulnerable and the elderly and the infirm. And it's not difficult to imagine how a right to die, as it's sometimes called, can become a duty to die, where people feel a weight of expectation because they might feel like they've become a burden for their families, or a burden for the National Health Service, or for society at large. And I'm very uncomfortable about that. And some people call this a slippery slope, where we start off with reasonably constrained criteria for when this might be allowed, but that over time, those criteria will broaden. That has happened in other countries where assisted suicide has been legalised. But I worry that actually it's not just a slippery slope, it's actually a moment where we flick a switch, because it does fundamentally change our relationship with people who are vulnerable. And that used to be very uneasy. And if I can just be a little bit, maybe pompous, or philosophical about it. Sometimes you hear people with very sincerely held liberal beliefs. They really believe in the agency of the individual. And they say, if somebody wants to end their life on their own terms, what's it got to do with you? But my personal view is, whatever we do as individuals has an effect on everybody else anyway. And if by changing the law, we allow people to make decisions like that, and as I said, I do really understand and respect the reasons why some people support this, it does have effects for other people. It has effects for their families, it has effects for the medical profession, and it has effects for the rest of society and our attitude towards death, which is quite an uncomfortable thing to talk about sometimes, and how we think about vulnerable people. So that's my opening set of thoughts. But I'd love to discuss it further with you, and I'd like to thank you for suggesting this discussion, because I think it's really, really important. So if anybody has a question, then please do put your hand up and we'll start talking. Do you want one?
I don't mind.
Does this matter for the recording?
Yes, we're probably better than Mike, so yeah.
Thank you, David. I am very in support of the bill. I worked in the health service on ambulances, as you know, and seen people suffering very badly, people with motor neuron disease who choke to death, people who have been in unrelenting pain, like my husband is an example of that, over 6 years. And I've seen people who paid to go to Switzerland when they weren't ready to die, but they had no choice, because the only way that they could ensure that they could have the peaceful death that they wanted was to pay for it and go alone. And that's the alternative choice. I know in Europe this bill has been passed, and it would be interesting to see some statistics on the comments you've made about people where you feel that the vulnerable have been penalised, if you like, for this. And I certainly don't have, we have the DNAR, which people can sign to say they do not want to have resuscitation. They are an appalling piece of paper. If people don't literally have it in their hand at the moment of a crisis, the healthcare professional has no choice but to try and save that person against their will. So we don't have a perfect system, but I think by turning this bill down flat, we actually deprive people of the opportunity to make choices. And And we wouldn't do that with our animals.
So, as I say, I do totally understand why you and others have this view. You raised a couple of things. So on examples where actually the terms have broadened, where these laws have been introduced in other countries, one of the issues is that if you apply this to people who have particular physical conditions, and you can narrow it down in terms of what those conditions might be and the circumstances in which you might be able to make this decision. In other countries, that has actually quite quickly broadened in terms of the inclusion of other physical conditions, but even psychiatric and mental health conditions. So in the Netherlands, there have been cases where people have chosen this route when they have mental health problems. So there are plenty of examples where the terms have broadened, and I know there is there's research that I'll be happy to share with you, Max, and you can send them to the people here if you wish, which has some of these case studies in it.
Is it not my understanding that the bill will only apply if those people have 6 weeks or less to live anyway?
We don't know.
I
We
had
don't know
understood
because
that there was going to be a caveat put in there.
We don't know because the bill hasn't been published. And we know from other areas of law that when a law is passed by Parliament, the meaning of the terms in the bill can be broadened by the courts. And there's even one interesting argument by some lawyers that I happen to know actually, is that using human rights legislation, it will be possible to challenge a law if this proposal is passed to broaden the definitions of the conditions, especially in the light of policy over recent years.
There's a lot of people
You can't hear. You want me to speak up? Okay. There is an argument that
I think that needs to turn on.
I can't turn the mic up anymore, you get feedback.
okay, I will. That sounds a lot louder. Okay. So I was just saying that that there is a concern among some lawyers that whatever is on the face of this bill, and we don't yet know what's on the face of this bill, the criteria can be extended in the future, not just by acts of Parliament, but by broadening the definitions that will be in the legislation. And there will be arguments using human rights law that if things apply to physical conditions, they should apply to mental and psychiatric conditions, for example. And we know from other countries that this is what's happened, that the scope of these kinds of laws do broaden, which is another cause of my concern. I mean, as things stand, I should say that I think the expectation of lots of campaigners is that the balance may be slightly in favour in Parliament passing this legislation. I think that's when I talk to the different campaign groups on both sides, who've spent a lot of time trying to work out that balance inside Parliament. I think the expectation is that it may just be in favour. But this is a changing situation because actually in the last couple of weeks, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and Siobhan renewed the Justice Secretary have both said they will vote against it. So we don't know. But it certainly feels to me as though my view may well be in the minority.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that you're actually speaking, the majority of people in this country wish it to be enacted there. And I don't know how much time you spend with people who have been begged to die, but I have spent a considerable amount of time with people who have begged to die, because I work in that volunteer, in that sector, and I've written to you on this issue anyway. And so when someone begs to be allowed to die, and you spend weeks with them, and they continually beg to be allowed to die, and they say it's cruel that they should be allowed to live, the argument for assisted dying to me is irrefutable. You then talk about the Netherlands, which I agree have gone, in my view, too far. But then you think of Australia, many states here in the USA, Austria, and many other countries. It's very effective. The slippery slope hasn't been the case, I don't believe, in many countries. There are lots of different, every country is slightly different. But I think for MPs to believe that they have a right to tell us how we should choose to die is wrong, especially if the vast majority of the population wish it to be enacted. I take your point exactly about it being a private member's bill, and I think it's ridiculous that it has to be private. But remember, Keir Starmer said in 2015 that he was very pro it, and I hope he'll make sure that if the private member's bill fails, he will ensure a proper bill comes to Parliament.
Well, on the process, I think one of the things that I think is if the second reading of this bill passes, one of the things I will argue is that once the House of Commons has established its position in favour, that the bill as a private member's bill should stop, and that the government should bring forward a proper bill with proper consultation, so that if this is going to happen, it happens in a way that is properly thought through, and that the law is as tightly defined and carefully drafted as possible.
Because it strikes me, I don't be personally been slightly scaremongering about how the thing can be a slippery slope. I think that's the thing for you as parliamentarians to make sure that it's properly enacted, so there is no slippery slope. I quite agree. I don't want it to be applicable to those who are mentally ill or any issues like that. I do worry about the pressure from families on people. But in fact, I don't know if the lady over there agrees, but it's normally the person who's in the last few months of their life who wishes to let deep die, and their loved ones are saying, oh, Granny is a fighter. No, Granny's had enough. Granny wants to be allowed to go on her own terms. It's only the families. It's very rare. In fact, I've never come across in the last 9 years I've been working this world, where families have said, oh, we want Granny to go. It's always the other way around.
I mean, I should be clear that when I've spoken to people in the medical profession about this, and people who work in palliative care, obviously people's views vary. And there are plenty of people in palliative care who say that actually this isn't the answer. The answer is to be much better at palliative care than we are. And I said,
I can give you lots of other people that said the opposite.
sure, yes, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm trying to.
When you see people in extreme pain, and pain cannot be managed by palliative care consultants fully, you will get about 10%, I believe, of people whose pain cannot be managed. And that is very tragic. When you see it in real life over many hours, it makes your heart really cry.
I understand. And I started by saying we've all experienced this, and there have been members of my family who have died in great discomfort. And this is why I don't take this decision lightly at all. And it's obviously not my personal decision. It's 600 of us who will be asked to take a position. But there is a difference, I think, between experiencing that sort of pain of watching somebody else suffer, and then having the responsibility to build a system that is safe and that cannot be abused, and that does not lead to unintended consequences. And that is why we, in the end, we don't have a system of pure direct democracy. And that we do elect people to make these decisions, and we do employ armies of civil servants to try to get the detail of these things right. And look, there is not just one decision for parliamentarians and for all the civil servants and others who might end up working on this in the future. We have a job before us in 4 weeks' time to answer a question in principle. And as I say, if the House of Commons then says yes, I think that then changes the conversation, and I think it will be the responsibility of the government to make sure that we have a properly considered and very tightly drafted piece of legislation, and not a private member's bill of the kind that at the moment we are due to consider. That this difference between understanding, and I really do understand the suffering that sometimes people have, and the responsibility to try to work out how a system might work, I personally am not yet satisfied. And it's not like I'm saying this on a whim. I mean, the Health Secretary has said this as well, the Justice Secretary has said this as well. I am not yet satisfied that there is a system to be implemented that will be free from risk. So you want to ask a question?
Yeah.
Would you like
What
to
makes the Health Secretary any more qualified than you are?
Well, I mean,
What are his qualifications in health and care?
well, right now, he obviously sits on top of the entire NHS and wider
What's his profession?
health system. Well, he's from a different political party to me. I oppose him on all sorts of different things, and I'm not. And he is not a health professional himself.
No, why?
No. But the reason I mentioned his position was actually, firstly, it was in relation to my comments about whether Parliament was likely to pass this or not. And my understanding is that his position and the Justice Secretary's position has had an effect on the opinion of some people in the Parliamentary Labour Party. So that may change the dynamics in the House of Commons. But I do think it is relevant as the Health Secretary that he thinks that there is a more pressing job, a more important and urgent job to get palliative care into a better place before we consider this kind of thing. And his argument is that is not an absolute no to this proposal at some point in the future.
Palliative care is not always about pain.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen bed sores, you can put your fist in. It's not just about pain. It's the dreadful things that people suffer.
Surely somebody who's got a bed sore shouldn't be put to death just because they've got a bed sore. That
I'm
should
not
be getting
saying
managed,
that.
and the staff should be getting monitored, and there should be better things in place to make sure people get proper care. I've worked in health and social care all of my life, since I was 17 and a half until a couple of years ago, to well by retirement age. And I have grave concerns because my last job would involve assessing people's capacity to make decisions and having families say what that person would want without actually knowing what that person would want, and normally to benefit the family rather than to benefit the individual. And I've got grave concerns that things need to be in place to keep these people safe, who don't have capacity at the time decisions have been made, to make sure what the decisions would have been are respected. And mine are in my health and welfare in great detail, because I've worked on that, but not everybody is. And I know you've said you've not experienced people wanting that I've seen it on the other side, and I've experienced people wanting somebody's life to end or them to be because of how they would financially benefit. And unfortunately, there are people like that in the world, and we need to protect vulnerable people from decisions that would allow that to happen. I think we need to invest much more in palliative care and much more in effective pain relief. And people with mental health problems, a lot of the time, with the right support, they would get to a place where they don't want to die.
I don't think there's been any suggestion that people without mental capacity will be permitted to go this route. And if there is a suggestion, it should only apply to people with mental capacity at the time they're making a decision. I mean, I wouldn't assume it for a second on that.
Something needs to be checked.
Well, indeed. And that's why I have to ask our MPs to make sure it's properly drafted.
Can I just pick up on that point about how we're making sure it's properly drafted? Parliament can do its best to draft things as tightly as possible, but we know from all sorts of laws that the meaning of laws change after Parliament has done its work and individual cases are then considered in the courts, for example. And then you're on to jurisprudence, and you're on to the relationship between an act of Parliament and other acts of Parliament, which might be about things like human rights, but it might be about wider considerations of access to healthcare, issues around judgments of parity between mental health and physical health. So yes, Parliament could do its job to its maximum potential and draft a bill that is very tightly defined. But it doesn't mean that that's how the law will then be carried out on an ongoing basis for years into the future. Because laws change, they're not living instruments. So we can't reassure ourselves
that sort of suggests, if in doubt, do not, which is slightly worrying. I feel, as you might realise, very passionate about this, but I quite understand we've got to be enormously careful. And also, we're fortunate now that Australia, New Zealand, Canada, there's lots of experience around the world. So those that are drafting the bill surely have got the opportunity to go and see the Health and Welfare and Social Committee report of last year, 2023. It's very thorough in giving a lot of information about where it exists around the world and people's various views. So you have the benefit of people's experiences for the last, 8, 9, 10 years around the world. So I think it's a shame to say we're a bit worried, so then let's do anything. We've got, this lady over there, we've got to be absolutely certain we don't go to sleep the route. But I think that's a reason for not doing anything. But anyway, I've talked too much, I think
I think, Nick, one of the other concerns I have, and I'm sure you'll forgive me for saying this, but you and I were both elected by the public, and therefore the people, they are the people to whom we report, and therefore they are the people we should be listening to. So you may have your view, but I think it's very important that we consider the views of the majority of the people, and therefore, whilst you're giving your personal view, and really quite strongly, and indeed I will give my personal view, but I have spoken, and probably you have too, a lot of the public, and certainly working in healthcare, I've seen people who wanted not to live, and the doctors have persuaded them that they will give them better care, and that has changed their mind. So, yes, palliative care is absolutely vital that we get that right, and they should be axiomatic. The two things should be working in tandem to make sure that if those people tell you why they want to die because they're in pain or they're frightened or they believe. I had one patient who was told he had terminal pancreatic cancer. He had a real belief that he was, for the whole of those 8 months, he believed he was going to die in terrible pain. I told him he would not die in pain, he did not die in pain, but he didn't believe me, so he had fear for 8 months. Every day he wished to die simply because he was so frightened. So again, there are lots of things we can do to alleviate people's fears and concerns, but we need to be listening to the public. You need to be listening to the public, not your 600 MPs who are in Parliament, who may have their own ideas about why things should happen. So I think a public consultation is absolutely crucial.
Well, this is one of the things I've argued. I've asked a question in the House. I've asked the Leader of the House of Commons to give proper government time to a debate, but also to allow for a proper consultation, which the government would manage so that we can assess not just public opinion, but medical opinion, and to work out not just what we think about the principle of this, but the practice of how a system would work. Now, actually, you sometimes see opinion polls saying that large numbers of the public, a big majority of the public, are in favour of this. Actually, I think that, like with lots of opinion polls, it depends a little bit on the words you use and the way you ask, and how the issue is framed. What I can tell you is, in terms of the emails and letters I receive to my office, there are more people expressing very strong concern and who oppose it than who support it right now. But I do sincerely think that, of course, politicians need to listen, and I hope I will always do that. But it is the job of politicians when you are helping to form laws to not just think about the principle of whether something should happen or not, but how the thing that you are drafting, how will that work in practice? Is it going to be a good law? Can people be safeguarded? Is it the right? Yes, of course, is it the right thing to do in principle? But even if you agree with the principle, what do you think about the system you are creating? And I know there are colleagues in Parliament who are wholly in favour of it. I know there are some who are wholly against it. And there are quite a lot in the middle who say, actually, I could imagine supporting this, but I'm not yet sure that we're in a position where, because of the quality of care that exists at the moment, or because I haven't yet seen the kinds of proposals that I'm comfortable with in terms of safeguards, that those people say, well, I'm not sure I can support it in the form that is being discussed at this time.
Surely, even if the bill's passed, if people didn't want to be euthanized, they wouldn't have to be. It'd be no different to, when they ask you to sign a DNA form, you have a choice. You don't have to sign it. So surely it would be the same. You don't have to agree, do you?
Sometimes DNA forms are signed by relatives of the person. It's about actually knowing anything about it. If they've got,
Yes, I hear what you're saying.
sometimes the forms say that somebody's not going to die are signed by relatives because they've got the power to tell over the health and welfare, and the person themselves haven't got the capacity or, I mean, I've challenged.
Yes, I know, I have what it takes.
So it's not just a matter of somebody signing, that's what they want.
I would also say that I think there is a difference between our attitudes to do not resuscitate, where...
It's still something you don't have to agree to.
Yes.
Is what I'm saying.
I know that.
You'll sign papers if you want to.
Yes.
And that's
So you have a choice. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And with euthanasia, you would still have a choice.
correct. Absolutely.
So one of the questions is about the nature of that choice and the extent to which people will feel pressured or coerced. And that is one of the life considerations for everybody as they consider this.
You will have it written down.
I think there's a difference between not wanting to be resuscitated when you've already died and actually ending somebody's life.
At what point do we sign this piece of paper to say that we want our life to be ended? Because my husband and I, when we were well, had a discussion, and he said, when I get to that point, I want you to give me the bill so I can live my life. We got to that point, and we never asked for the bill. He didn't want it, he was carried on to the end. So when you can have a view at one point in your life, you can have a different view further down the line. So when you say something, sign the paper.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
No, sign the paper at some point.
It's usually when you go into hospital and they don't say, they think you might die, and well, you want to be resuscitated if that happens. That's
That's what
usually
DNR
happens.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I do think we have to stop using the argument that we would treat our animals the same, because actually putting an animal down out of pain is not leaving anybody open to abuse. But sometimes that decision is made by the person is because the family want to care to stop so they can do it. Lots of reasons. It's completely different. Nobody's going to suffer any type of abuse because an animal's been put down. People may suffer abuse. Anyway, so we'll take it. I'm just saying, I don't think we should be using the argument that you would treat your animal like that, because an animal being put down does not deprive anybody of any finances or any other means. Whereas if a human being, life is ended, it can be due to people wanting to gain from that death.
Does anybody else want the vote?
No, I'm just trying to hear what the other lady, the other side said. Never heard the word. We can't hear the back without.
So the lady to my left talked about the question of when consent would be given. Because people can change their minds or circumstances can change. And my answer to that is, I don't know, because I don't know what the proposal is. And this is one of the problems with the process that we have at the moment. The bill isn't published, details like that are not yet clear.
Don't you think it's a bit unfair on you? Don't you think it's a little bit unfair on you to be given this piece of paper that you're going to discuss in 5 hours? You have mostly you get a chance to read papers and mull it over in your head, and you have time to make a decision. But you're saying you're given 5 hours to make a decision, and I don't think that's right.
Well, I hope that the bill will be published soon, so that there is at least a chance for everyone to read it, discuss it, think it through. It won't be very long because it's 4 weeks. But on the debate itself will only be 5 hours, and I do think on a question like this, the debate should matter, because we should hear every conceivable argument from both sides and all the different shades of opinion between those two poles. And in a debate of that length, just once, where contributions will be time limited, I think there will be a lower quality debate than the one that we need for something as important as this.
Nick, can I say, why are we reinventing the wheel? That gentleman made a very astute remark that a lot of the other countries have already done this. And I think you particularly said Holland is very robust with theirs. So why do you not ask them to see the document that they use? Because clearly some of these documents work, maybe get 2 or 3 countries, and then pull them apart and see where the failings in those are, if there are any. Rather than reinvent the wheel, I think it's rather and pointless. We're going all around these arguments. All of your colleagues are going to stand up in Parliament and say have various different comments. This has already been done in other countries. Why can we not just use their experience?
Well, I think we can, and I think the people who are thinking the most about this are trying to find out what experience has been like in the Netherlands, in Switzerland.
But you only have to read the Health and Welfare Social Committee report last year, which is very extensive, extremely informative. And I can bore you for hours.
We can't hear you either.
So if I could just finish, if I could finish my sentence.
No, sorry, let the RMB finish his statement, if he wants to.
Everybody can read the report that you just mentioned, Sarah. Everybody can read about experience in different countries in the world, because it is true that in certain American states or other European countries, things like this have been done. Now, we will argue about how effectively those laws have been drafted in those places, because some will say that actually there are good safeguards in somewhere like the Netherlands. Others will say, well, there are big cases of people with conditions that are not what we would imagine are appropriate for assisted suicide that have been allowed in countries like the Netherlands. Oregon in America is held up as an example. But if you look at the research in Oregon, there are more people who say they want to make this choice in Oregon because of their concern that they feel a burden to their family than about things like pain. So even when you look at these examples, they divide opinion. They divide opinion for a variety of reasons, some of them because of fundamental values and how people feel about human life and how people feel about how our actions affect other people, even when it's a very personal action. But what I think is really important when we're talking about this is it's not just about medicine and science. It's not even just about human ethics. The values that some people will very sincerely believe it should be an individual's right to do this. Some people will very sincerely think that it's too great a step for society. But on the detail, we're talking about a law, and it's not just about ethics, it's not just about medicine, it's about the way laws work. And actually, we do have to do this from scratch to some degree, because even though we can learn from these other places where there is experience, our legal frameworks are completely different in this country. The Netherlands is not a common law country. The United States does not have the European Convention on Human Rights and all the jurisprudence that flows from that. We're in our own legal circumstances, and this is, yes, it is an ethical consideration, it is a medical and a scientific consideration, and it's a very human one, because we all have very strong held views about this, and we've all had experiences that inform those views, but it's also a legal one. And as I've tried to say, Parliament could draft this bill in an incredibly tight way, but we don't know which way it will then evolve, because laws are living instruments where courts change things, where actually political and moral and social attitudes end up influencing our interpretation of laws that were written years before. So we can't know which way it will go in the future. That may not be a reason not to do it, as you say so. But it should be something that we have to consider as we discuss the merits of doing it both in principle, but also, if Parliament agrees to the principle, how things should then work in practice. It's not a simple thing to do.
Do you not think in the meantime then you can stop prosecuting people if they go with a family member to Dignitatis?
That is a different question, and one I actually haven't considered. So, to be honest, I would want to think about that.
They're not doing anyone else any harm, are they?
Well,
You're not
there's
be able to drag somebody on a plane.
that is a related but different question, and one that I think we would all need to think through. And to be honest, I haven't thought that fully through, so I don't personally know.
Sort of understand.
Does anybody else have anything?
Could you explain if the vote is against the suggestion, what logically could be a further step forward to achieve more debate and to take into consideration people's views?
Thank you. Well, this has been a recurring theme in Parliament. There have been several attempts in previous years, going back some time now, to legalise assisted suicide. And each time it's been rejected. But that hasn't been the end of things, because those members of Parliament, and actually I think quite often it's been people in the House of Lords, each time it has been rejected, people have come back with different proposals. It is obviously a topic that people have strongly held views about on both sides, and with our population aging and more people suffering long-term conditions and so on, it may cause more people to want to discuss this on both sides of the argument. So I think if Parliament rejects it may mean that Parliament doesn't consider it again, at least for a year or two. I mean, consider precise proposals. There may be general debates. There may be exchanges and questions. There may be reports written by the activists, by the politicians who support it. So I don't think the issue is going away, even if this particular Parliament says no in principle. But to be perfectly honest, I have no idea what Parliament will decide. I started the Parliament thinking it was likely that this law would pass, and I feel as though opinion in Parliament is maybe more divided than I had first thought. But we won't know until everyone votes. And some people haven't made their minds up yet.
I don't see how anybody can make up their mind when they haven't seen the bill.
No.
I mean,
And that's exactly
it seems
what-
absolutely bonkers to me. As I understand, is that what they're suggesting is that two doctors should speak to the individual, and then it will go before a judge. That is the broad terms of it. And it's going to be 6 months to 12 months, which I think is sad, but the fact like. So the bare bones have been there. I think Lord Faulkner's bill in the House of Lords suggested something like that. Is it likely to be on similar terms, do you think, or not? You've got no idea.
I mean, probably.
It doesn't make Parliament look very clever, does it?
Well, it's not Parliament. It's the individual MP who is proposing this bill and the people who she is working with to get the bill into a place that they are happy with. Now I agree. I think the process is utterly ridiculous.
Good.
And
We agree on something.
I'm sure we agree on lots of things. And when was it? I mean, I think I raised this in, there's a thing called business questions on Thursdays where you get to go and you can raise any issue at all, anything is in scope, and the leader of the House of Commons, the minister from the cabinet who is responsible for the management of all the debates and and the process by which bills go through the House of Commons, the Leader of the Commons answers questions. And I thought this was, I'm looking at Ben, I reckon 5 weeks ago. I don't know. It was several weeks ago. I went to business questions and I said, it's not appropriate for this to be done on a Friday with a private members' bill with such limited debates. Can we have a proper consultation and have government time for us to consider this in detail? And they're refusing to do it. And we've had lots of general debates on all sorts of topics in the last couple of weeks alone, where the government gave hours of parliamentary time to discuss things that are fine. I mean, it's not a bad thing for Parliament to debate Black History Month, or the fact that we're approaching Remembrance Sunday. Those are things that can be discussed, of course. But in 4 weeks' time, we are going to be asked to consider this bill with very, very significant consequences, whether you are in favour of it or not, and this can't be the way to do it.
Could I just perhaps jump in on Heather's point about sort of how do we generate discussion about the whole sort of general understanding of how as a society we approach death and dying and decision making around those things, because I think that is one thing that those with a prominent role in the community, churches and other organisations can do really positively is just encourage us to have these conversations. And this fundamentally really is the reason I invited you along, Nick, is because I believe we need to be having these conversations, that we shouldn't be afraid to talk about death and dying, that we need to be having these conversations early so that we're having these conversations when we do have capacity, when we do have a wide-ranging understanding of what they might what the impact might be on us and on our families. And I know there's been various other movements to try and get people to make those decisions about where, how they might want to die. But just to try and encourage people to talk about it, aside from the politics, just to talk about it within the community. And then obviously, Nick, it's your job then to listen to that and to try and respond to that appropriately from your point of view. So I just wanted to jump in on that, Heather, and say I think it's something that we can be promoting and can be doing actively as churches and as other organisations within the community.
And I should say thank you for doing that. And I think it's great that you are doing that. And actually, we could do this about all sorts of different issues. And I would be more than happy to come and have all of these discussions with you about any of the big issues that we face. It's fantastic that you're engaged on this issue, and I'm sure you're engaged on all sorts of different issues. And I definitely think, to Max's point, MPs need to be connected to people and to hear very directly from you. And also, to explain what's going on. And a lot of these processes are complex, arcane, and so on. And sometimes there's a good reason why something's happening, but it does not look obvious at all on the outside. So I would love to keep on these conversations. You want to ask a question?
If private members does pass, what then happens?
Well, it will become the law if it passes. I mean, I don't mean if it passes in 4 weeks' time. That will be the second reading. So when a bill is first proposed, it has a first reading. That just means its title is laid before one of the two houses of Parliament. You have a second reading, which is kind of in principle discussion about it. If it passes, it then has a committee stage where a small group of people consider the detail of it. And then it has a report stage where the bill might have been amended a little bit. And then the wider House of Commons or House of Lords votes on the report and then it has its final reading in that house, which is called the third reading, and then it goes to the other house. And that's a ordinary passage. Again, a bit more complicated sometimes, but really thank you for trying to explain it tonight. But so that's the process. So if it passes its second reading, and this is what I mean, I think if the House of Commons decides in principle, okay, we're going to do this, then I think I personally would like to see the government step in and try to make sure that there is a more detailed consultation and a better process than the one we have at the moment. Because I don't think it's right. I mean, I understand how this has come about. It's a conscience issue, so there will be no riff. MPs will just make up their own minds. And maybe that's one of the reasons why neither political party wanted to bring this forward. But in a comparable conscience issue, I think in the 1960s with the legislation that legalised abortion, that was actually subject to proper rounds of consultation, even though it was a conscience issue for MPs. So it is possible to do these things, but it's just not what's happening at the moment. Anything else?
So it is 6:30. We've been going for an hour, so there is an opportunity if you want to break and sort of move into the back for coffee and things. I sort of said a hard stop at 7 o'clock. I said a hard stop at 7 o'clock. Nick has very kindly given up his time in half term, and I know you've got family waiting at home. So I wonder if this is an opportunity to break, to move into the back. We will draw curtains at 7 o'clock at the latest, but perhaps this is an opportunity just to thank you again, Nick, for coming and for speaking candidly and openly about the issue. And if you are willing just to stay for a little bit longer and to answer questions, we'll move into a slightly freer mode, and you're very welcome into the back. But firstly, can we just thank you, Nick, for being here tonight?
Well, and I just want to wrap my thanks to Max and to all of you for coming. So thank you and see you shortly.